You got a potentially bad situation coming to the Kansas City area, and you're going to hear this first and maybe only on KCMO. I hope that's not the case. But I started hearing some of this from folks in law enforcement over the last couple of days. And do you remember the end of Joe Biden's term? When, of course, he was giving pardons to, everybody with the last name Biden. Remember that? If you had the last name Biden, you were getting a pardon, right? And that was a big story, national story. And you also had about 36 people who were on death row who basically had their sentences commuted to be life in prison without parole. That got a lot of attention as well. Well, what got overlooked, and I admit we were guilty of this to some degree, is that Joe Biden announced right before he left office that he was commuting the sentences of nearly 2,500 people convicted of non-violent drug crimes. So that came out, and, we didn't really know what it meant, but the administration and Joe Biden, now, I don't know if he actually knew what he was signing with any of this stuff, because God knows what kind of shape the man was in at the end of his tenure. But he signed this, and, they pitched it as, hey, these are people who are convicted of nonviolent drug crimes, and they're serving far longer sentences than they would receive today.
I will interject. There were some e-signings there, remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
The old
electronic signature.
Yeah. What is Trump calling it, too? The fake pen that he was using or something? Trump's like, I signed my own executive orders. So I got this on good authority from law enforcement here around Kansas City that now, of those 2,500 people convicted who Joe Biden commuted the sentences of, we have 31 people in the Kansas City metropolitan area that had their sentences commuted by the Biden administration and released from prison, 11 from KCK, and 21 from KCMO. And these are individuals who were charged with distribution of crack cocaine, methamphetamine, both in some cases, use of firearms, in furtherance of drug trafficking offenses. As one person told me in law enforcement in the area, most of these people are violent individuals that ran large drug operations and intimidated witnesses and victims. Most are affiliated with well-known street gangs around Kansas City. Groups like Tasha Gang, Mob Money. Sounds like a rap group. These are the same individuals, local, state, and federal law enforcement worked hard to get off our streets. You had law enforcement around Kansas City who literally risked their lives to arrest these people and get them convicted of federal crimes, right? Federal charges. It's not like your local municipal ordinance that got violated here. Joe Biden commuted these sentences. And now we are going to be releasing dozens of people back onto the streets of Kansas City who have very violent backgrounds. Who in their right mind would do this? Unless you want more chaos and more crime and more destruction in your urban cores in particular, because you know where these people are going back to, right? Not going back to Leawood. Promise you that. So where and why would you do such a thing? Unless you want to destroy the communities that you insist you've fought for politically your entire life. Why would you do this? I mean, nobody in their right mind, politics aside, would say, okay, I'm going to put these people back into these communities, like here in Kansas City, on both sides of our state line, and think that this is good for anybody. When these are violent people who oftentimes, were arrested by our own law enforcement around Kansas City. They risked their lives on the job to get these people arrested. They got them brought up on federal charges. They're in prison, and now they're going to be back out on the streets around Kansas City. And as is oftentimes the case, these people, as I've been told by law enforcement, are very dangerous individuals. They intimidate witnesses, and they oftentimes don't get charged and can't get charged with what they actually did. And later they'll be caught on lower level things like selling drugs. But that's oftentimes because they could not get the evidence against them for the much more violent activities that they were involved in. And these people are now going to be back in and around Kansas City looking for something to do. You think they're all going to be a bunch of choir boys when they come back here and get released onto the streets of KCMO and KCK? What do you think? Please. You know the answer and I know the answer. They're not coming back here, to volunteer for the local churches. Maybe one will, okay? Maybe there's that one that just had, found Jesus in church or found Jesus in prison and is going to be a totally changed individual. That's always possible. And you always hope and pray for that. But that's not going to be the bulk of these people, okay? They're going to be back to a life of crime. They're going to be thanking Joe Biden while they do it, by the way. Don't forget that. They're going to be thanking Joe Biden while they do it. And they are going to make this community much less safe. And you can thank and look back to the 2,500 people who Joe Biden commuted the sentences of right before he left office. This was back on January 17th that this happened. And yeah, it got a lot of attention about how Hunter and everybody else with a Biden last name got their pardons. But now you also have people with very violent backgrounds who are going to be back in Kansas City. And there's no one in their right mind who should be defending this. Nobody. I mean, law enforcement, I know for a fact right now in Kansas City, I've talked to them, they're up in arms about this. I mean, they've got their hands full as is right now, right? We've talked about the issues happening in KCMO. But now both sides of the state line, they're going to have to keep an eye on these people who they've already arrested, and they can thank Joe Biden for letting them back out onto the streets. John's on KCMO. Hey, John, good morning. What's going on?
Well, you can probably bet that those 31 individuals are not Mundo in the Morning listeners.
That's probably a safe bet. But, hey, if they're converted, if they've had that total change of heart, I mean, I hope they're here.
God bless them and welcome to the family.
Yeah, so, I like that, John.
But the thing about it is in Topeka, there was like a dozen individuals that I was talking to the sheriff. He said there's about 12 people that were in jail all at the same time. And it seemed to be a coincidence that most all the car break-ins and thefts went to zero, almost zero, because those 12 people were in jail at the same time. They said, is that a coincidence? We think not. So if that's 12 people in Topeka and the car break-ins, people getting in your car, stealing stuff out of your car, just small little petty stuff. If that's the case there, then what can 31 people who are, used to crime, used to doing bad crime on a major scale due to a city like Kansas City, and what kind of multiplication effect will it have on crime down the ladder? Because, they're not doing the petty stuff. The people doing the petty stuff are them because it goes up the ladder.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You're right, John. You're absolutely right, man. And that's why this is horrible news for Kansas City. And think about, too, some of the other major American cities. What do you think they're looking at? Right? Like these people, you got 1,500 people now. How many are going back to New York and L.A. and Chicago and Dallas and St. Louis? I mean, we've got a few dozen here that are coming back to Kansas City. But you are now putting thousands of violent people back onto the streets in your urban cores. They're not going to your ritzy suburbs, okay? They're not going to your rural communities for the most part. They are going to be in urban cores terrorizing people and terrorizing communities that have dealt with the bulk of poor policies on crime over the last few years that have been led by Joe Biden and, frankly, his political allies. But they're the ones who insist they're going to be helping urban cores around America. They should put thousands of violent people back into urban cores, including here in Kansas City. Please. I really hope. And we have grown our audience, obviously, all around Kansas City. It's been tremendous what this show and what this station has done over the last 18 to 24 months in particular. And we've seen that growth in parts of Kansas City where maybe we did not previously have high listenership. People are waking up. And the sooner they wake up to this, the better. Because they are going to be terrorizing people in poor communities around Kansas City who can't get out of them. They can't move. They don't have the money to move. And that's where these people are going.